I wish we were together in Indonesia like we planned, but next year, hopefully we'll be there. And while there's so many really positive presentations about extensive reading, this one, unfortunately, is not quite as positive, but it's also a very important one, and one that I think that needs to be discussed, and one that we can learn lessons from. So as you can see from the title, Academic Dishonesty and Extensive Reading. Again, myself, Paul Goldberg from Xreading, and Thom Rawson from Nagasaki International University, who also works with me on Xreading.
Hello.
Okay, so I'm going to start with one reality and two fallacies. Okay, the reality, or the unfortunate reality, is extensive reading is inherently susceptible to cheating. It's just something, it's a fact we all have to face. One of the nicest, most important points of extensive reading is that we give students choice. We give students freedom to choose what they're going to do, what they're going to read. And that's really powerful and very important. But at the same time, it lends itself to abuse, unfortunately. And there are students who are going to take that freedom and not use it very properly. Okay, but that doesn't mean, as some of, not us, but some of our colleagues may say, well, for that reason, we need to get rid of extensive reading because students are cheating. I would say that's quite foolish. A good analogy might be transportation. I think we could all agree that cars give you a lot more freedom. Go where you want, go whenever you want, anytime, any place, as opposed to a train. But at the same time, people are going to abuse that and get speeding tickets, especially if they have a deadline they have to meet. Okay, where nobody on a train ever gets a speeding ticket. However, just because cars get speeding tickets or drivers get speeding tickets, no one would ever suggest let's get rid of driving. Okay, so I think it's it's a pretty good analogy in that, yes, you give people freedom, they're going to not always do the best thing with it. Two fallacies. Number one, and this is my belief, is that cheaters are only hurting themselves. I often hear teachers say, I don't care so much about cheating because they're just hurting themselves. I firmly do not believe that. Yes, cheaters are hurting themselves, but they're not operating in a vacuum. Okay, other students know what's going on. Whether they know some of their classmates are, how can I say, actively cheating, as in getting answers, or lazy, whatever it is, students know what's going on in the classroom. And students who are not cheating, if they see their classmates who they know are either dishonest or lazy, getting the same grades that they are getting the same credit for the work that they are really doing, but their classmates are not doing, it is going to start hurting their motivation. Okay, and it's going to erode their confidence in the entire academic system. Okay, so I therefore believe really it is teachers' responsibilities to try as much as possible. You don't have to go crazy, but I really think we just can't say, oh, I don't care about cheaters so much, they're just hurting themselves. The second one, and this is probably from just again my opinion, is Japanese students don't cheat. I've had the benefit of teaching in many places around the world, and I do believe due to societal reasons, cultural reasons, Japanese students cheat maybe less, or it's less acceptable, and I acknowledge that, and they're more, they don't want to get caught compared to other places where cheating is more acceptable. But I think, unfortunately, some teachers in Japan have just thought, well, Japanese students almost never cheat, I don't have to look out for it. Because, well, if that was the case, I wouldn't be giving this presentation. Okay, so many of you who are using Xreading, especially last year, heard about this big incident that happened. I should say that there's always cheating going on with mReader, which was used by a lot of schools before Xreading and still being used. It was notorious for students sharing answers. Same with Xreading. We've had cases of students selling answers on various websites, commerce websites. Fortunately, I believe that as much as some students don't like to read, they don't like to spend money even more. So I think that's not such a big issue. Of course, still looking, to try to stop that. But the incident I'm going to talk about was a very big one that started when I received this letter from a student, going back to the point I made before. Students don't like it when they know that other students are cheating. So a student at one university basically sent me this email and told me that she was aware of somebody posting answers to YouTube, which that I found very scary because YouTube is free. So I investigated, and oh my God, that is not what I want to see. And this was really stressful. And what do I do? I'm, as the owner of Xreading, I need to make some important decisions. First decision is, do I shut down or investigate? When I say shut down, is should I contact YouTube, explain that this person posting the videos is doing something that's dishonest? I don't know if it's illegal. I still need to investigate that more, and hope they would shut them down. Or should I investigate, try to find out who it is? And the benefit of that is, if I do get them shut down, they might just pop up somewhere else under a different name. If I can investigate and find out who they are, most likely they're going to be a student. And whether or not posting answers is illegal, it's certainly a case of academic dishonesty, and they would get in trouble. The disadvantage of investigating is it will take time, and it did take quite a bit of time. I had to come up with a plan. I established a team. Sounds like a Mission Impossible. We decided to engage with this person. They were responding to direct messages. We set them up. We pretended, I don't want to get too much into the details, but we set them up in a way that they did not know who we were. And eventually we set a trap. Okay, and this was there on about 2 months later. These were still there. Once we caught the student and figured out who they were, spoke to their teacher and the dean at the university. This is what happened. In case you can't read that, it basically was a message apologizing for their bad behavior. Okay, so that was a big relief that we were able to get that. At the same time, we also were able to see the answers that the student had posted, and they weren't all correct, and that will be important in a moment. So these are some of the books, and the yellow highlight indicates an incorrect answer. Okay, because we knew the wrong answers and which books, we could then look at the Xreading database and figure out which students had actually watched those videos. So not only could we catch the student who posted the videos, we could actually, with a pretty high degree of certainty, find who watched them as well. And it was quite depressing. We set the bar at 5 books or more with the exact answers that were on YouTube. And we found 1,455 confirmed cases. It would have been more if we dropped the number of books. I know we had a few students who were cheating that got through, but these are the ones we did not want to get false positives. Across 97 institutions, almost entirely in Japan, but a few other places as well. Sometimes just 1 or 2 cheaters at a school, but one school actually had over 200 cheaters. So that was my next big decision. Do I report this or not report it? In other words, most teachers had no idea, other than the ones who I told that we caught their student. I didn't know. I was very nervous. What will be the reaction from teachers? Will they blame Xreading, even though I was confident it was not the fault of Xreading for the reasons I explained earlier. Xreading just catches them. It doesn't cause them to cheat. In the end, I decided to report it and needed to make sure my evidence was very strong. So I compared in 2020, in that time period from September to December, 1,455 students added 5 or more of those 26 books. I compared that to 1 year earlier, the same exact 26 books and only 90 students. That's pretty indicative. But somebody might argue, well, 2020 was a pandemic, students were reading much more. Maybe that's the reason so many more students read those books. So I then looked at those students and saw, of the cheating books they had read, what percentage of their total books? In 2019, only 3%. So if a student had added those 5 books, they would have read another, I don't know, 97%. I can't do the math in my head right now. They would have added a lot more books. In 2020, 41%. So the cheaters had made up almost half of their books. So it was, again, a strong indicator. For some students, suspicious books made up almost everything. And just again, to put it into a perspective, we decided to look at the statistics. What are the actual chances of adding 10? If a student added 50 books What were the chances of just 10 of them being from that 26? A 1 in 8 trillion chance. Okay, so I think that makes a pretty good indication that the odds of a student just adding those books by luck is not possible. For additional evidence, like I said, some of the questions were incorrect, some of the answers were incorrect. Kitchen Love Story was a great example. In 2019, I compared 2020, number of quiz attempts was a lot larger. The score of an 80% was quite similar. But for students to get question number 1 incorrect is generally unusual because it's more common to get later questions in the book incorrect. And we looked, and in December of 2019, only 25 students had gotten question 1 incorrect, where almost all the students in 2020 got that same question correct. And as the final coup de grace is only 3 students chose a very wrong answer. If anybody had really read this book, they know that the main character would not have stolen money. It had nothing to do with the story. Yet in 2020, almost every student chose that. So I felt we had enough evidence. The actions I took, I contacted the teachers. I explained and advised what I thought they should do because I understand dealing with cheaters, especially when I'm the one providing the evidence, can be stressful. There was a lot of emailing. I'd say over 3 months, I was getting on email and calls with concerned teachers, how to deal with this. I got a huge variety of reactions from some people just, yes, I always knew these students were cheating. Thank you for showing me the evidence. To, no, you must be wrong. My students would never cheat. And then even when I showed them the evidence, they would accept it, but they still seemed, unwilling, and then everything in between. And then ways to improve the system to reduce this, prevent this from happening again. So some changes we made to reduce cheating in Xreading. We've enhanced the user logs, and I'll show you what this looks like in a couple of minutes. User logs are show you what exactly what a student does every time they are reading a book. We've added book usage details, and I'll show you how that is also useful. Students can no longer see their quiz score. We changed that. Previously, they could see their exact score. Now we change it to pass or fail because we realized that that's actually really useful information. We prevented students from opening books in multiple tabs. We realized that was allowing students to have the book open and the quiz open at the same time, which are not supposed to with Xreading. The next 3 things are things we are working on, hopefully by next year, is creating a larger bank of quiz questions, which will be randomized. That has some risk because the more questions you ask, the quality is going to drop. In other words, when myself and my assistants create Xreading quiz questions, we usually create 7 or 8 questions, maybe 9 questions, and we always choose the best 5. So if you have to make a bigger bank of questions, I believe the quality will go down a little bit, which is something I would rather not do, but unfortunately it's necessary. We're going to make the quiz questions easier, which might sound strange, but from our investigation, what we often found out that students were genuinely reading, but they were scared to fail the quiz. And we've analyzed, and I think the vast majority of Xreading quizzes are very good, but there are some quizzes that have some very poor questions. And I can see if a student maybe missed one question by accident and then had a tricky or bad question, they could end up failing the quiz. So I think that will actually reduce cheating by giving students less stress about failing the quiz. And we're actively monitoring places where quizzes could be sold. So now for anybody who's using Xreading, I'd like to give you some advice, some technical things that teachers can do. In assignment settings, there's a lot of settings that you can use to reduce cheating. For example, the easiest, most important is probably to turn on the maximum reading speed. Actually, in the past, it was not turned on. Now we have the default of 300. That simply means if a student reads over 300 words per minute, they are going to get flagged. And the teachers, I actually suggest putting it lower than that. You will occasionally get false positives, but it's the best way to stop students from just speeding through the book. Randomize the question order. Again, that we used to have the questions asked in chronological order because I thought that would be easier, but again, it leads to cheating. There's an inactivity timer, which means when a student opens the book after 2 minutes, of no activity on the page, the book will close automatically. 2 minutes and with no activity means no scrolling. And most students, even your slow reading students, are going to do something on the page within a minute, even if it's just scrolling a little bit. If they are actually reading that slowly, the book is probably too difficult. Okay. Their Xreading, as many of you know, does connect with the mReader quizzes. mReader quizzes, I think the quality is not as good, but they do have a larger bank of questions, more difficult to cheat on. I wouldn't suggest necessarily going only to Xreading quizzes, but switch back and forth and don't tell your students because they're not going to know. Teachers know Xreading quiz, mReader quiz. Students, it's just a quiz. Okay, so they might get the answers from a friend who's taken an Xreading quiz, and when they go to take the quiz themselves, the questions are totally different. You could restrict books to one student per assignment. That I did not create this feature for this purpose, but if you create short assignments, if one student selects a book, nobody else in that class can choose that same book for that same assignment. Okay. It's actually, I did it because I didn't sometimes want my students not to choose the same book for an activity. It's a great way to stop cheating. However, you can't do it if it's a semester-long assignment because after a little while, there'll be no more books for anybody to choose. And finally, a very unknown setting is you can actually restrict quiz accessibility. You can set a password or set a quiz time, but that's really only if you know your students are going to be taking the quiz in class. Okay. Some more advice. Teachers really need to check the user logs. So here's an example. A teacher reported, these are actually situations that were reported to me. A teacher reported, oh, this student read just over 200 words a minute. Do you think they really read? So I went to the user log and I looked and I said, well, I should say the student read the book for 12 minutes, which it seems like a reasonable amount of time. I went to the user log. I said, wait a minute. The student read the book for 12 minutes, just as it showed, but almost all of it was read just in 1 minute. And in 11 minutes, they did almost nothing. Okay, so the user logs, it takes a little while to get used to how they can help you. Very common is to see the inactivity pop up, and that's a good indicator that something suspicious is going on. Of course, there are always legitimate reasons, but that is something to keep in mind. In book usage, you can look for books that are oddly popular or some strange pattern. This one just came up last week. Teacher reported, I can't remember what they reported, but they said something was a little bit suspicious and they asked me to take a look. And I did. I said, wait a minute, this student read all these books on August 1st? Well, not impossible. You know, obviously they must have had a deadline, but still very suspicious. Next clue, that's a pretty high reading speed for a student. Again, could be possible. So I said, let me investigate a little bit more. How about earlier? What was the student doing? Well, in July, they were reading at approximately 80 to 90 words a minute. Now, I would love to be able to tell people that Xreading can double your students' reading speed in 1 month, but that really would not be realistic. And that was a really good indication that something very suspicious was going on. And then I thought, this student was choosing short books and they chose Our Mutual Friend. Really long, high-level book, a lot more difficult than The Tickets or Old Boat, New Boat. What's going on here? So then I went to book usage. This is a feature any teacher can check. Checked Our Mutual Friend. This book had been read at this university 4 times. Okay, nothing wrong with that. I checked this book. Yes, it's been added 4 times. Oh, wait a minute. 4 times. Well, here's the student I was looking for. And the book has been added 4 times, all on July 3rd, July 30th to August 2nd, and exactly the same quiz score. And when I checked the quiz score, every one of those students had gotten the same question wrong. Okay, so again, it's depressing that it turns out it wasn't 1 student cheating, it was actually 4 students cheating. But it's important for teachers to know this, okay? You have to check for matching quiz scores like I just showed you. In program settings, this is a feature coming soon. You can actually hide books. If you know students, like I would suggest to this school, hide that book, Our Mutual Friend. It's clear students are sharing answers. Teachers have to be vigilant. You can't wait until the end of the semester and start cracking down on students, because they're going to be like, wait, I've been doing whatever behavior you're accusing them of. They're going to say, I've been doing it the whole semester. Why are you cracking down on me now? What was wrong with it before? And it's very important, actually, despite the fact that Xreading gives you all of this data, it's better not to actually let students know what you can see, because they will use that. So for example, one school, the teacher showed them, look, if you read over 300 words a minute, I'm going to catch you. Sure enough, the next month, most of those students had read, or many of the cheating students had read at 290 words a minute. Okay. Some additional advice for reducing cheating. These are more pedagogical things. As much as possible, make extensive reading connected to a class activity. Now, I talked about this yesterday in my impromptu presentation, is if you can at least spend 5 or 10 minutes in class doing something related to the reading they were doing out of class, they're going to realize this is something important and going to decrease the chances of cheating. Plus, if they're going to take part in the activity, they need to read. Be realistic with reading goals. I think we keep, we're trying to get our students to read as much as possible, which is of course great for them, but we have to be realistic in that if the goal is too high, it might encourage cheating if students can't reach that goal. Similarly, the reward has to correspond to the effort. If you want your students to read 200,000 words, giving them 5% of their grade is not the way to do it, because they just rather give up that 5% and spend that time doing something else to pass that class. You need to regularly remind students about the benefits of extensive reading, that it's slowly, they're not going to see improvement very quickly. They need to keep doing it, but they should also try to enjoy the fact that they're getting exposed to many different stories. Maybe having competitions between students. I tend to think students feel that cheating against the teacher, against the institution, is more acceptable than cheating their classmates. Next, advice for confronting teachers. I realize that confronting teachers can be very stressful for teachers, especially in a place like Japan where it's not very common. I've had quite a bit of experience in other places I've taught, so I gave teachers this advice. Without giving specific details, just tell your students very confidently that they had strong evidence they'd been cheating, the ones from the YouTube. But don't tell which students. That's extremely important, not to say which students. Then explain that the punishment for academic dishonesty is quite severe. However, because you're such a kind teacher, you'll give them the opportunity to atone by admitting, and that they will receive a lighter punishment. Okay. Again, but don't tell them what the severe punishment is or the light punishment is. Give yourself some freedom to decide if you have to later on. So I gave this advice to, I said, teachers at 97 different schools, and some took it, some did not take it. And the ones who took it, I think, was much more successful. The ones who not, this was the case of a school that directly confronted their students. They basically had, I think, about 25, it was a big university, they had about 25 students cheating, and they just called those students and sent an email and said, we've caught you cheating by watching videos on YouTube. And this is the reaction they got from some students. This is very nice. Only 2 books the student had read, but was very sorry about their behavior. Again, this is, very, I think, typical Japanese, a very sincere apology. Unfortunately, though, for every one of these students were 3 students who did something like this. Yeah. Basically, not only did the students cheat, they doubled down and lied about their cheating. In some cases, students threatened to call their parents into school or threatened to call a lawyer, and that can be very stressful for teachers in schools. Especially they don't know. The evidence is coming from me, and they have trust that they can see what it looks like, but they don't want to deal with these difficult situations. So that was what happened with schools that confronted their students. And we'll turn to Tom now. Again, not only is he my assistant and the teacher using Xreading, he also unfortunately had to deal with some cheaters as well. So Tom, you want to take over?
Sure, Paul. I've got 10 minutes. Is that it?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
10 minutes.
All right. So as you know, I'm the technical advisor for Xreading. I work with Paul, but I'm also a customer of Xreading, and I use it extensively with my students. And we have a intensive English program called the Global Tourism course at our university. And of course, I knew about the large collection of cheaters and the YouTube channel beforehand, and then suddenly I received an email from Paul as a customer. Oh no, I'm part of the ring. So here's what happened. I was alerted. I didn't know what to do at first, but I decided to use Paul's expertise. So I had a planning meeting with him. Then I confronted the group of cheaters. There was a holdout student, which I'll tell you about. And then what I did to get the students to atone for the cheating, and then maybe my observations on the effect or results. Okay, Paul, go ahead. So in December of 2020, I got an email from Paul. He said 16 cases at my university. 14 of them were in my Global Tourism Extensive Reading class. And that's a class of 35 students. So go ahead, Paul. So I was kind of stressed about what to do because, as a teacher, I just want to get this over with. I just need to deal with this. I don't have time. I'm so busy. I don't want to mess around with it. And plus, I work with a group of teachers, and we're all supporting this group of global tourism students. And we decided to have a meeting about it. And there was a diverse set of views on what should be done, from just ignore it, just don't do anything about it, or have a casual conversation with each one by one and tell them not to do it from now on, that kind of thing. But the more I thought about it, the more I said, well, no, because I don't want our global tourism course is across the years of the school. The students all know each other, and if word gets out that cheating is, you can get away with it, that's going to kind of poison our well. So I fought back against my colleagues, and there were some heated discussions. But in the end, I think it was a good thing to do. So I spoke to Paul. He gave me a lot of good advice on how to deal with it. It was very nervous for me because I don't like confrontations, but we decided the goal would be, let's figure out how much cheating is going on. And in the process of trying to figure that out, never show our cards to the students. So that was the goal that we had. So after that planning meeting, I went forward. And go ahead, Paul. Next slide. So I confronted the group. I used the words that Paul recommended. We have strong evidence that there's some cheating going on. I didn't give any names. All I did was make an announcement during the class. I told them that some severe punishments are going to be doled out. However, those students who come forward and tell us what happened will receive a lesser punishment. And all they had to do is reply privately to me by email. And so as you saw from the previous slide, there was 14 students in the list of the class of 35. And how many of the 14 students came forward and admitted it? Would you guys like to guess? Maybe type in the chat or something. How many students do you think came forward to admit it when I confronted them? Does anybody want to take a wild guess? Okay, I've got 4, 13, 5, 0, 20, 15. All right. So the people who are on the high side, you're definitely correct. The answer is, Paul, I don't know if the answer is on the slide. Is it? Is it?
No,
No, it's not. Okay, so the answer is 27. 27 students came forward and admitted cheating. I was so shocked. I didn't know what to do after that, because that's not 14, Paul. That's 27 in my class. And so I asked them to reveal what happened. And it turned out, in addition to the YouTube, the students were doing other ways of cheating. So I actually learned a lot of good information. We have our students log the time they spend reading, because we use that for some analyzing the amount of time they spend studying. And some students were falsely reporting about how much they were reading. They also reported sharing answers. They reported using 2 devices to take the quizzes. They would have like the screenshots of the book on their phone or something. They were using translators. They had turned translation on somehow in their browser on their phone, and they were getting the information translated and so on. So really totally shocking, but useful to learn what the students were doing. Okay, so next slide, Paul. On this screen is a spreadsheet I made. That screen was a spreadsheet I made of all the different ways students cheated. Okay, there was one. Yeah, go ahead.
Some of it was not Xreading related at all, right?
No, not at all. Like, sharing answers, I guess, that's not really Xreading related. It's just somebody telling somebody else the answer, which they can later use on Xreading. But they hadn't used that YouTube website. So yeah, and then there were some things they were doing in our reading class that were not related to Xreading at all, that they were cheating at. Okay. So there was one holdout student, a person who didn't respond to the request to step forward, and was basically our worst offender, the one who had done it the most and had the most number of books. So I took the next step I was really nervous how to handle this, because I didn't expect anyone to kind of call my bluff on the information I had, but I tried to stay positive and confident. And I mentioned privately to that student that I hadn't received their email yet, and had they remembered to send me one. And they were like, well, why do I have to send you an email? I didn't do anything wrong. And I was like, okay, so they really are going to fight this thing. So with my co-teacher, a Japanese teacher that I work with, we scheduled a meeting between the student and ourselves. And the next slide shows what we did at that meeting. Okay, so we had a piece of paper that showed this X-Hub reading, and then we had the student's reading record on another piece of paper, and I just put them in front of the student side by side, and I said, you mentioned that you didn't do anything wrong, but this looks kind of strange to me. Did you ever see this website before? And their face just told me the entire answer. It was just, I don't have a picture of the face because that would be unethical, but can you imagine the face, I'm caught, and, oh, that's what you meant. That's what I was told suddenly. I didn't understand what you meant. Oh, okay, it's just a misunderstanding. Great, no problem. And I was able to put that student in the pile with the other confessors. I didn't have to do any extra harsh punishment for a student, which was stressing me out. I didn't want to do a really harsh punishment. I do like to help students more, but this needed some kind of discipline in order to kind of stop the students from doing it. Okay, so let me go on to the next thing, which is what we did for punishment, I believe. Paul, next slide. Thanks. I asked each student, go back one. I asked each student to write an atonement report where they had to write a paragraph of what happened in detail, how you did it, when you did it, who you did it with, and so on. I asked them to write why they did it, why they decided to break the rules of extensive reading. We create a rule-based extensive reading in our department. There's 4 rules of extensive reading: fast, fun, a lot, no dictionary. and we make sure they understand those rules. Are you following the rules? And then the third paragraph was, okay, now how are you going to get back on track and follow those rules that we've made for you? Give us details on how you improve. And then the last part was to give us an audit of all the books they had cheated on. And that was required, otherwise they would be given a failing grade in the class. Okay. So we received all those reports from everybody, luckily 100% submission, you can imagine. It was good to get that information. So that also we could compare with the list that I had from Paul. And there was actually more books on their list than actually the list Paul gave me because of the other types of cheating they did. Okay, Paul, next slide. And the results of this atonement, and we've reduced the grades for all the offenders. Basically, we just took away the words that they had cheated on, and the points they got for those books were removed. It lowered students' grades, maybe by 1 grade level in most cases, but it didn't affect anyone as far as failing goes. Everyone passed the course. There were 1 or 2 students who failed the course, but they were probably going to fail anyway, regardless of the cheating. The cheating was just the last nail in the coffin, basically. That situation was resolved, and we were able to move forward, and without too much bad blood in the classroom. I tried to keep it positive. I tried never to show an angry face or anything like that to the students. What are the negative impacts? I'm not sure yet. I'm still, I'm still wondering if they're just going to get more clever, or they're just more cautious, or maybe they really are changed. Actually, I have one, since it was a year ago, I have one story that the same students I taught in a writing class this semester, and one of the students wrote in their blog about that experience, and they wrote that they really messed up when they did that, and I don't know why they wrote it. They know we read all their blog posts, so I don't know if they were trying to just show what a good person they are, but I felt the student had changed their study habits. They decided, I guess I wasn't really taking it serious as I should have, and I'm really, since that time, I've been working very hard to try to get better and better, and I want to be a good reader. And they wrote about it in their blog, and it was like wow, I didn't realize what an impact that experience had on the students. So maybe that was a positive outcome for that student, but I don't have any measurements to see how other students were affected. And will this happen again? Yeah, probably it will. Reading in that class, it's worth 50% of the grade. So it's really high stakes. And we do give the students plenty of support and plenty of time for reading, but there's always going to be students who procrastinate and cut corners. So that's what I've got, Paul. Go ahead. You can.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Thanks for sharing your experience. Again, it is very depressing to see that happen, but we need to know and act on it, because that's going to prevent it. So in conclusion, so this is what I've learned from this. I want to share it with teachers based on this long experience. Like I said, it came to my attention in September, and I was still dealing with the repercussions right really until the end of January. Number one, I'd say, is to take action. If students think they can get away with cheating, or at least give an excuse, then cheating will only increase. Okay, so I know at some schools where they were very well-intentioned, and when they caught students cheating the first time, they just got a warning. And all that does is tell the other students, well, cheat until you get caught, because there's no risk. All you're going to do is get a slap on the wrist. So I think action needs to be taken in some way that's going to stop students from doing it, or I should say scare students away from doing it, unfortunately. Confronting students comes with risk. Even with concrete evidence, it's risky, as some will deny and threaten to escalate, and schools aren't always supportive. I think Tom found that out. I don't know if you mentioned that, Tom, in your presentation, that there was some questions on how much you were allowed to even punish them.
luckily my supervisors were supportive of me as long as I didn't do anything really drastic.
Okay. Yeah. In other words, you don't want to say, hey, you're going to fail this course and then find out, for cheating, which I know there's some, differences in different countries, but in some countries, for example, where I'm from, if a student got caught cheating on a test or caught cheating at university, it's a very good chance they would be expelled. In Japan, that's not typically the case. The main point is just make sure your university will support you. It's best to be vague. Students will typically assume that this teacher knows more than they actually do. Also, by being vague, it gives you more flexibility later on if you need it. Students are typically risk averse, and they will prefer to confess and get off with a lighter sentence than risk getting a more severe one. And again, I think that's what Tom showed with his students, the ones who hadn't really gotten caught but were scared. Knowledge is power. If the teacher shows students exactly what they were caught or how they were caught, they will use that information just to cheat in the future. And schools are not always supportive. Like I said, sometimes teachers would say, yes, you're going to fail this course. And then the school would say, sorry, you can only fail them on their extensive reading component of the course, which I think was very disappointing for the teachers. But that's just a reality, and it's good to be aware. So I think we might have a minute or two for questions, if the moderator can confirm that.
Yes, there is a minute or two for questions.
Okay.